Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I'm here with...
Rob H. This is AV Rant, the show where we answer your questions about all things home theater and audio video. And no panic attack for me this week. We have lots of questions, and we had them early. So there is no worries about filling up 2 hours and quite a bit more, probably.
When are you going to change your little thing that says from AV Enthusiast to AV Rant Co-Host?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess we're like a year into this now.
You think maybe you can stop being so Canadian for 5 minutes and just make an assumption? Make an assumption that I've accepted you as part of the podcast, that you're not still on a probationary term.
That could be the case. It would be quite interesting if I didn't send over the topic list 1 week.
Yeah.
I'm not an official co-host.
I'm done. I'm out. Wash my hands of this thing.
Oh, dear.
All right, so this is AV Rent, the podcast where we answer your AV questions, and we've got oodles this week, so we will get right into them. But first, we tell you how to ask us more questions, because as we chop them down, you guys got to keep setting them up for us. So, there's a fan behind me today. I should have moved that. That looks funny. But anyhow, I'm in my brother's... I'm starting to call it my brother's room. I'm in my media room, my home theater, which my autistic brother, has been living with me for so long that I'm now calling it his room. My parents got him an AC, like a unit that you set down and you put a little thing in the window, because the temperature is just right in Florida where you can open the windows and it's not too humid and it's really, really nice, but this room stays pretty hot. So they got him this unit, and he has set the temperature. You can almost see your breath in here. It's so cold. So I had to turn everything off, and everybody's complaining about it, but it's pretty funny. Anyhow, so the fan that usually would be blowing right on him 24/7 to keep him cooled off because he's autistic and apparently runs hot is now sitting back there and looking weird. So anyhow, this is the AV podcast where we answer your AV questions. So if you want to give us some questions, you can come to avrant.com. That's exactly what it sounds like, avrant.com. You can go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast. That's all one word. You can email Rob at rob@avrant.com, tom@avrant.com. You can come to Twitter at FirstReflect for Rob, or at avrant_Tom for me. And of course, there's G+. We do record these podcasts every week at 9-ish p.m. on Tuesdays Eastern Time. So if you'd like to watch us live, head over to Google Plus or our YouTube page, which I guess our YouTube channel, which is my YouTube channel, because I link everything up. It's plus Tom Andrew, I think. I think it's all one word. I don't really remember. Anywho, you can always follow us, Rob, on Twitter, or follow us on Facebook, and then you will find alt when these things are happening. Or you have to ask me. I guess my Google Plus Hangouts plus Tom Andrew, whatever it is, to add you, or just add me to a circle, and I'll add you back, unless your name is something weird like bodybuilder, which I got 2 of those today, and I'm like, okay, I don't know, you don't really sound like a person, so I'm not going to put you in a circle. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop right there. Anywho, and that's how you get informed, and you can watch this being recorded live, and if you want to hang out afterwards, we have little Google Hangouts afterwards, which are kind of nice. You're more than welcome to join in. I joined into a Google Hangout that happened recently for the AV Nation guys. It was one of their podcasts. They have so many, I don't even know which one it was. But I joined in, and I was like I was just like you guys. I was like, I came late, and everybody was already talking, and I kind of stuck around for a bit and then disappeared and didn't say I said like one thing and then got off. It felt kind of weird, but it's kind of the way it is. So I strive when people come in to make sure that I acknowledge them, say hi, and try to keep them in part of the conversation. But believe me, guys, I'm just like you. So if you guys want to show up and just listen in and hang out, that's cool. If you got some questions, we're always happy to entertain them, no matter what we're talking about. And that's 9 p.m. Eastern Time is when we start the recording, and then usually around 11-ish p.m. Eastern Time is when we start our Google Hangouts. So, that being said, we have oodles of questions today. Oodles and oodles. Oodles and oodles and oodles. I guess what we're going to call this one, oodles. First of all, we talk about our listeners of the week. We're going to thank Eliezer. He enjoyed our deconstruction of the Zoo audio cable ad in the Home Cinema Guru 4K article last week, and he wanted to say thank you with a little monetary donation, as did Niclas H. He basically,
that wasn't so much a donation.
That wasn't monetary as much as he got us he emailed a while ago, and I must have missed it, that told me how to get into TuneIn Radio. So I followed his directions, and we should be on TuneIn Radio soon. That being said, AV Rant immediately crashed. So
Yup.
I'm not really sure what's going on with that. It says bandwidth exceeded. I am hoping that that gets fixed pretty soon. I have talked to the server guy who's going to hopefully fix that. We'll see what's going on with that. I'm not really sure. I've sent it up the food chain. I honestly cannot figure out why. And if anybody's a server guy who knows something about this, or gal, please let me know, because basically all the podcasts are hosted over at Libsyn, which you guys should know. Many of you will figure that out just from the URLs. And so it just comes through, you just basically, it's redirected from there to whenever you guys ask for the podcast. And the website itself hosts nothing but the website itself and some images and all of Rob's comments. So unless Rob is crashing it with just pure word count, which seems unlikely, I can't figure out why it would be me. I think it must be one of the other sites on the server.
As much text as I post, that really should not be exceeding any bandwidth limits just for text, yeah.
So if you do want to be a sponsor or a listener of the week, all you have to do is either figure out some way to support us by, like Niclas did, finding some way to get the word out about AV Rant and let us know that you did that. Or if you want to come to the website and click on the buy us a cup of coffee, that goes straight into the AV Rant coffers. That's a PayPal donation, and that goes straight into the coffers, and that goes to maybe bribing my server guy to figure out what the heck's going on and fix this thing. Whoever's palms I have to grease to get this to be fixed. Today I'm wearing a DVI Gear T-shirt. That's so old. I'm pretty sure DVI Gear is defunct. I don't know if they're around anymore. But this is one of my favorite T-shirts, and I gave it to my son to use for art because it got old, and now it's got paint all over it, and I was painting. So that's why I'm wearing that.
Well, thank you to Niclas, thank you to Eliezer. And Eliezer had a quick question. He wanted to know our outro music.
Right.
He wanted to know what that song is and where it came from, and we haven't talked about that in a long time.
We haven't. Ted, one of our listeners, donated that to the podcast. That was his way of supporting the podcast. If you look on the AV Rent site, when it's back up, on the bottom right, it will say outro music, intro music, and it will tell you where a link to their sites. When the site comes back up, if that starts to if you click on that, it doesn't go anywhere. Ted, if you're out there and still listening, let me know where I should link it to, and I will make sure that Ted gets his just rewards. Yeah, it's great music, and I think he also donated the music for the Home Theater Geeks too. So I'm pretty sure that that music came from at least one of their musics came from him. So there you go. That's where it comes from. The intro music was something that I just found. It was just like what they call nerd rap, and
nerdcore.
That's what nerdcore. And I contacted the guy, and whose song I like just that little snippet. And I contacted the guy, and he said, yeah, you can use it. I'm pretty sure he stole it anyways. So I think I don't know that getting his permission really did me much good. Yeah. So by this point, it's probably hopefully it's public domain. Now we've got some comments. I'm going to skip those to get to the questions. And I'll let you know what we're going to be talking about. It's a lot of room treatments this week. Michael S., this is from last week, asks us about some high-end preamps. It's a question I loathe, but I will answer. Andrew N. over on Facebook asks about HTPC room correction programs. Robert wants some suggestion for upgrades. This is where room treatments start to come in. We also have that's all from last week. I think actually, I hate to say it, I think Robert asked us something a long time ago.
That was like 3 weeks ago.
And it somehow got lost in the mix, and I'm sure it's my fault, so I apologize. Don wants to know whether upgraded speakers or additional room treatments make a bigger difference. Ryan wants to add acoustic treatments but doesn't know where to start. John moved into his new house and has some updates and questions also about room treatments. I think that's going to come in. JC, who's not Jay-Z, but JC, wants us to double check his basement theater plans, which we have already given him suggestions, and he's kind of worked it out and wants to make sure he didn't misunderstand or anything. I think it's great. We are happy to put the AV Rant seal of approval on it, and if it sucks, it's Rob's fault. If it's great, there you go.
All Tom's results.
I did not say that it was all me. If it's great, I'll let you share.
I think that was the implication in the way.
No, that was the implication. But if I'll let you share if it's great. If it's not great, though, it's obviously something you said.
Okay.
You see, that's what I love about Canadians. They're very
Yes.
William sent us another review to tear apart, which is a pretty good one. I almost want to start with it so bad, but I'll wait. Greg asks about, and that's a subwoofer review. I'm going to put subwoofer in quotes, but it's a subwoofer review. Greg asks about separates versus an AV receiver. Ashley on Facebook asks about using his Logitech Z5500 computer speakers with HDMI. We've already talked about him or answered some of his questions before, so this is a follow-up. Bruno and Fred, who we'll almost certainly not get to, we might not get to Ashley, wants to figure out what type of projection screen to get. And Fred has a speaker and AV receiver purchasing questions. The answer is almost certainly accessories for less. But that being said, Fred, we will get to your questions and answer them specifically afterwards. So Eliezer and Niclas, once again, for our listeners of the week, thank you very much. We appreciate all our support and any support that you guys give us, telling your friends anything, putting our name on the side of a race car, even if you have to crash it to win. Right. We're okay with that. There are some news there's some news that we'll just briefly cover. Sonos.
Did you purposely skip Infinite Gary? You did, didn't you?
No, is Gary on here? I did not. Where? Is he really on here?
In between Greg and Ashley, you went right.
Oh, I did. I apologize. I swear that was. I think maybe you have a blind spot for Infinite Gary. Oh, Gary, it's like color blindness, but for just your questions. And somebody did suggest that we get some specific music for you. It's the Gary's corner. Asked about. In fact, Gary, if you want to just send in your questions via text, audio, voice, we'll just stick it right in there. Here's Gary's question for the week. Asked about Dolby Surround versus Auromatic, which has to do with Auro 3D, which we talked a little bit about last week. One of those hype ones. All right, sorry, that was really a mistake. Sonos is suing Denon over Helios. Helios is their basically competitor to Sonos, so this shocks exactly 0 people. Sonos, if you're not aware, is a standalone system that allows you to take your music from your whatever playlist or whatever. I think it works with iTunes and everything these days, and stream it to different speakers all over your house. Denon
wirelessly.
Wirelessly, yep. Yeah, and Sonos has been doing this for 10. Is it 10? It's not 10 years. It's got to be what, 5 years?
I don't know years? At this point. Yeah,
it's been
probably
a really long
longer
time.
Than we think.
And Denon just started last year with Helios, so yeah, that's up. And Google's Nest division bought the Revolv and immediately killed it. Revolv was when we talked with what's his name?
Josh Pollard
from Digital
Entertainment 2.0. Yeah,
that's what it is.
Digital Media Zone.
I get them mixed up because there's both of them. The Revolv Hub was one of those hub-based systems where you can control all the stuff in your house, and it was the one that had all the antennas in it. Well, Google bought it, and then now they're not going to sell it anymore. But I think it's one or the other. Well, maybe both. Either they wanted the technology or they wanted the people. So
it sure sounds from the statements that it was the people they were more interested in. They made specific mention that they're like, oh, there's about 10 people in the world who really know all this stuff, and we just acquired, several of them by purchasing out Revolv. So that seems to be what they were after. It's a little bit of a shame for anyone who had purchased. I mean, the Revolv Hub was a $300 device. They'd had 7 radios in it, not all of which were active yet, because they had planned ahead for some systems and that. So obviously, at this point, none of those are ever going to become active now for the people who were waiting for Insteon support and stuff like that. So it's a little bit.
Was that a Kickstarter one? Was it the Kickstarter one?
I'm sure it was at some point. I don't know for sure, but I think it was, yeah.
That's too bad.
Too bad for those folks, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Yeah. Nest got themselves $3.2 billion or whatever it was from Google, and now they're like, hey, we have money, let's go acquire other people.
Yay. All right. So that's going on. That's our news. We're not covering anything else. Other than I'm still thinking Gotham's a little weird. I'm not sure I'm loving that yet. Whatever.
Okay.
I'm just going to grunt at it for a bit. I think it's my point. All right. So Lee sent up some very important warranty news. Onkyo is addressing their infamous no sound / no network issues by extending the warranty on many AV receivers sold between 2009 and 2012. and they're going to extend those warranties all the way to the end of 2018 and offering free two-way shipping and repairs. Boy, this sounds like the Red Ring of Death on Xbox.
Yeah, actually it does.
It sounds exactly like that. So basically there's this known issue, and it seems like it's a bad network chip. Then they've just like, oh, yeah, enough people have complained about it, and we've done enough repairs that we know what it is. For those of you that repaired them yourselves or whatever, wow, that sucks. But anyways, he used it for his TXSR 707. Onkyo sent him the shipping box and packing material in even tape. And they sent it all for free, and all the shipping to and from Onkyo was paid for. The whole process took about 2 weeks. So Lee is quite happy with the service. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a couple of links that I'll be sure to post up over at Facebook and hopefully on AV Rant once our bandwidth is back to not being exceeded. Yeah, the main article describing everything that's going on is actually on the European Onkyo website. So if you click the link there, it only lists European countries, but there is also a separate link for North America as well, which obviously a lot of listeners will be in either United States or Canada or Mexico who are listening to this podcast. So we'll have all those links there. The process basically involves you entering your serial number or calling them and telling them your serial number, and then they will decide if the unit you have is applicable under this. But if it is, then yay.
I'd get it fixed, dude. I'd do
no
it.
Kidding. Yeah, even if nothing's happening, just say it is and send it in and get it fixed.
Yeah. It happened once. Yeah, that's it. All right. So Michael, after our advice last week, Michael seems to finally have figured his speakers out and his new Klipsch subwoofer out, and they've been blending nicely. He did the subwoofer crawl like we suggested by just connecting his iPhone directly to the subwoofer to play sweeps. He reran Odyssey. The audio set up. He went and checked it because that's what you need to do, and it set his center to 120 hertz crossover and his surrounds to 100 hertz. So he just left those alone. It's probably okay. I mean, I'd be okay. I don't remember what the speakers were. So
if it's setting it higher than 80, it's almost always fine.
Yeah.
Because it means they're like, yeah, it was above 80, so
yeah.
It usually sets it correctly then.
It did set his towers to large, so he manually set those to small with an 80 hertz crossover. Yay. He used the LFE input on the subwoofer, but did he have the? No, he has the Klipsch. But set the crossover knob on the sub as high as it would go, just in case. Good choice. I would do that as well. And he used his Denon AVR 1912 separate stereo audio setup menu to boost the levels of his front speakers a bit so that they would blend properly with the subwoofer for 2-channel only playback. And the results? Dun, dun, dun. He says everything is all blended and sounding sweet, so hurrah for that.
Indeed. It's very nice to know that it is finally blending and sounding the way he wants it to, and he's happy with his subwoofer, and he doesn't have that old Polk subwoofer that he was really not happy with anymore, so I'm very, very pleased for him.
Yes, that's good. Now, I think what's worth pointing out, it's a process. You know, it really is. It's a process. To do this, it's not. You could sit down and do it in an hour or two, but more likely you'll sit down and do an hour or two, and then a couple days later you'll do another hour or two, and then a couple days later you do another hour or two. You end up sort of having to fiddle with it in order to get it just right, because everybody's room's different. So you listen to the advice, see what applies to you, try it out, and see if it works. But
yeah, I really like that. During the subwoofer crawl, this is the way I do it too. Is just taking your smartphone, just using the headphone output, taking a 3.5 millimeter stereo to just a regular red and white RCA connection. So that way you don't have to worry about adjusting any settings in your AV receiver. Turning off the room correction, making sure you're in direct mode or any of that stuff. It's like, nope, the signal's just coming straight out of your smartphone or out of your iPod or something like that, and then you're just playing sweeps. So yeah. I like that approach. It makes it very, very easy to know it's only the subwoofer that's doing things at that point.
Yeah, his wife, Michael's wife, is now concerned that the bass will disturb their neighbor upstairs. To which I say, success. Michael doesn't really care, which is good. I don't know
if you do have any complaints about that, hasn't mentioned having any sort of damping platform or feet under his subwoofer just yet, so that is always the thing we recommend. SVS has their compliant rubber feet. What do they call that? Their sound path isolation system. Yeah. Might not work for other brands of subwoofers because it's a threaded thing that's supposed to go where the regular spike feet would go. Probably, but the easier ones, the Auralex Subdudes, Auralex Gramma pads, or just figuring out something kind of squishy you can put underneath your subwoofer so that it isn't directly vibrating the floor. Did you just say like a cat? Is that what you just said? I was speaking and I didn't hear that clearly. And you are grinning from ear to ear like a Cheshire cat, so I assume that that is what you said.
We'll have to wait for the audio
Oh,
replay of
dear.
that one. Rohan says, after a discussion last week, he agrees that his room is likely holding back his sound system more than his subwoofer, but the marble floors and designer paint on the walls were design choices that he won't be able to cover up with treatments. That stinks, dude.
Mm.
He does want to know if there's a bare minimum he might be able to do in terms of acoustics. Yeah, we kind of already told you that one. So it's that first reflection point, which would be on the wall. And we're going to talk about what the first reflection point, because he asks, and the very next question is, what are first reflection points anyway? We've mentioned them a lot, but it isn't really clear to him what they are or why they're so important. So the bare minimum is, the first thing you want to do is you want to treat your first reflection points. The next, for me, it's either some sort of absorption on the back wall, and then some sort of absorption on the front wall, right near the right behind the speakers, the main speakers, if you can, or more importantly, absorption in the corners for bass trapping. Those would be like the first three things I would be looking at. Now, that being said, first reflection points, the easiest way to think about this is sit in your main seat, have somebody grab a mirror and slide it around along the wall, the side wall, and you look at the mirror. When you can see your speaker, that's your main speaker, your main left. If it's on the left wall, your left speaker, and the right wall is your right speaker. When you can see that speaker in the mirror, that's your first reflection point. Okay, that's the point where the sound is going to come out from the side of it. Basically, if you think of the sound coming from the speaker, it's going to hit the wall right there, and it's going to bounce back directly to your ear. That's your first reflection point. You want to put an absorptive panel right there, and that's why it's important. The reason that it's important is because that will be delayed, because instead of coming directly at you from the speaker, it is going to the sidewall, bouncing off and coming to your ear. Well, it is slightly delayed, and that means that your ear is now hearing the same sound twice, and it messes up the stereo image. It messes up the imaging and the sound stage, and pretty much everything, makes things sound muddy, or not as well defined as they should. Now, that's why they said the first reflection points are so important. Now, these width speakers that people talk about are after you damp those first reflection points, you then put a speaker. Basically, you essentially put a speaker there, and then you're controlling what sound is coming from there and what timing it is coming from, and therefore that sound is now adding to the ambience, adding to the image, instead of detracting or I guess detracting or destroying it.
Yeah, it can help you give the illusion that your room is a different size than it actually is, because now you can actually manipulate the delay between the direct sound that went in a straight line from the speaker to your ear and the reflected sound that went in a line from the speaker over to a wall, or it could be to the ceiling or to the floor as well, but it's the sound that went in a line from there to a surface and then directly to your ears. So the reason it's so important as compared to secondary or third reflections, and that is because it is one bounce, therefore it's the strongest sound other than the direct sound that went in a straight line from the speaker to your ear. So it has the most, possibility of sort of smearing the sound that you're hearing, because it is a strong reflection. I mean, as far as a bare minimum, I mean, hopefully he can put a rug. I'm really hoping he can put a rug at least,
Isn't he in India? Aren't they have rug type peoples?
I mean, it's very possible that, they really wanted that marble floor and want to see it, but man, oh man, if you could at least put a rug in between the speakers and yourself to at least partially damp that first reflection off the floor.
Because there's a first reflection on the floor as well. If you think about it, there's a
right.
first reflection on the floor, and there's a first reflection on the ceiling as well. So all those are, we talk about the ones on the walls because you're not going to put an absorptive panel on the floor. You're hoping somebody has carpet. Right, and it's going to harder to put one on the ceiling. A lot of people put diffusion up there, or if they can't, they'll put absorption up there as well. But the ones on the wall is where people are normally hanging things anyways, so we kind of fixate on that one. But that's that first reflection point there.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to come up later as well, but one thing he might be able to do, if the whole point of the aesthetics is that they really want to see the floor and they really want to see the walls, do you also really want to see your ceiling? Because one of the big issues we pretty much know at this point in Rohan's room is that he just has a lot of reverberation. Sounds in there just echo. And if you can at least absorb some of the reflected sound, and a good portion of that is between your floor and your ceiling as
Sure,
well.
why not?
So if you can put something on your ceiling, visually that shouldn't be too obtrusive. I mean, you can get panels that are basically the same color as whatever your ceiling is. So that would be one way. At least you could reduce some of the echoes. You know, might not really help your stereo imaging and
Yeah.
things like that, but at least you can reduce some of the echoes.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's willing to do that. If you are or were going to put any artwork on the walls, get a printed acoustic panel so that
Yeah, we've
you can
discussed that before. It seems like
yeah,
that's off the
it seems
menu.
so. Yeah, but
But
that's
at
yeah.
corners too. We talked about corner trapping, where you take like those triangular traps,
Mhm.
the tri traps from Gick, and you put those in the corner. That's mostly for bass. Uh, Certainly couldn't hurt. It's not going to do much for your
No, I
stereo.
mean any absorption in his room will be a help.
Will be a
Like
help, right?
any, just to knock down some of
Get
the
a
echoes that
big
he has.
dog. You know what I mean? Wow, how do you feel about having a bear for a pet? Or
Hmm.
something like, I mean, just something large to absorb.
Get lots of big pillows, throw them
Yeah,
all around the room.
sure, why not? Yeah, I know. It's like it's one thing. It's like my wife's family, because she was actually born in Turkey. She's half Turkish, and we go there, and I'm like, I never have to worry about, because there's always rugs everywhere. Like
Hmm.
everybody's got they'll have carpet in their houses, and they'll put rugs on top of it. I'm like, I love this
Hmm.
country, dude. I'll never have to worry about the floor bounces in here. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
But that's and at this point, any place where it's aesthetically okay for you to add some absorption would be a bare minimum for you at this point. Anything that you can do would be good. So yeah, um, certainly, and I think we're going to come up when we come up to this subwoofer review, Rohan. We're going to talk a little bit about how having a more sub, because he was talking I think last week about getting a bigger sub. Would that help? Having more sub, I think last week we said would kind of hurt, because you already got a bunch of reverberations, and that's just going to make it worse. Very, in maybe having more, getting rid of some of the sound is what you really need, and then you can start worrying about, how you can get lower bass and stronger bass and evener bass. Because right now he's got so much reverberation going on. I'm not really sure that there's much else you can do other than just try to add some absorption simply. A drop ceiling, man. The guy is dying for a drop ceiling. Which is a Google search away from you going, that's a terrible idea, Tom. That's awful. Because it's ugly. I mean, it's what they put in offices. All right,
Hmm.
Tony. Couldn't agree more with our recommendation for making your own absorption panels. Hey, absorption panels. But he does think the specific material used can make a difference, especially at lower frequencies. He forwarded a chart that shows the absorption coefficients of many, many different kinds of insulation. Tony settled on Owens Corning 703 rigid fiberglass at 4 inches thick with an air gap behind the panel. And Owens Corning rigid fiberglass is that, and rock wool have almost exactly the same coefficients of absorption. Those are the preferred materials to use. And whenever you get online, if you start researching this, when you come across somebody saying, well, make sure you do this because you don't want people breathing fiberglass, just throw holy water at them, because that's just old wives' tales and crap. It's not true. You do not have to worry about rigid fiberglass flaking off and getting into your lungs and giving your family cancer. You do not have to worry about that. Okay. Plus, you're going to cover it with a fabric anyways. That's what everybody does. Nobody puts up raw fiberglass, but you could, and it wouldn't be a problem. So that being said, there's rigid fiberglass if you're really worried about the rock wool, and there's a bunch of other ones. Did you look at I didn't even look at it because I've seen that before.
Yeah,
So
I looked through there. I mean, for me, one of the easier things to do is to just go to some of these websites that sell, already fabricated acoustic panels. Lots of them will just sell you the raw materials that they
yeah,
use so that you can make your own. So, GIK Acoustics. There's a new one here that I wasn't familiar with. What is it? ATS.
ATS. Yeah.
That's going to be coming up later, but, they sell that.
Is
Acoustic
Ready
Black.
Acoustics still around? They used to do it
They're
too.
still around. I'm not sure if they do. I mean, they sell kits, I think, right? They have their own kits.
They used to sell just raw material. It's been a long time since I've been on that website.
But I mean, almost any of the places where you could buy the pre-made panels, they'll also just sell the do-it-yourself. And a lot of times it is Owens Corning 703. I've definitely seen
That's
that.
exactly what they're selling you, dude. Or they're selling you Rockwool, which
Yeah,
is just a competitor to Owens Corning. It's
yeah.
the
A
same.
lot of them have that Ecos fiber stuff now too, which is
Yeah,
basically like recycled blue jeans. It's all
yeah,
shredded up. So yeah.
yeah. All right. So now we're on to questions from last week. Those are just comments. Woo! The questions from last week. Michael really wants to get into vinyl, and he's looking at a high-end analog preamp. The Emotiva XSP1 for a grand has piqued his interest because it has many very positive reviews and much lower price point compared to some of its competition. Ain't that the truth? Michael simply wants to be sure that his preamp is not the weak link in his system. So what can we suggest? Okay.
You better go first because he's probably not going to like my answer.
I know he's not. He's really not going to like it. And this is a shame, too, because I don't want to be an anti-elitist, because I'm not. It's like I think it's great that people spend. Like, I think some of this gear is really beautiful, especially the really high-end stuff. There has been nothing in my experience that makes me think that spending more on a preamp can give you any less or any more performance, really. Generally, spending more gets you less performance. It just gives you, I don't say less features, right? So it's giving you fewer features, and
certainly fewer knobs and buttons.
In the guise of saying, okay, because we don't have anything else, because all our stuff is just this, therefore it can't be corrupted by that other stuff. Well, I really need to see some evidence that these things are being corrupted, and it can happen. Okay, let's just put that out. It can happen. I have seen measurements done, Gene's done them, of receivers with their pre-outs, right? And the pre-outs will be noisy, or the pre-outs, it takes they're not putting out very much voltage, so certain amps aren't basically coming up to volume. They won't switch on if they have the auto on sort of thing. It's pretty rare these days, but it has happened in the last 5 years, maybe the last 7 years. I've seen stuff like that happen. But here's the question you got to ask yourself, Michael. If the pre-outs are silent and there's nothing that is affecting the signal as it's going through, what more can you do other than that? Because a preamp is essentially one thing. Now, a lot of times with phono preamps, I mean, there's a real reason to have a phono preamp because of the way that vinyl is recorded. They actually reduce the bass based on the algorithm. Because if it has too much bass in it, the needle will pop out. It'll pop out of the groove.
That RIAA curve.
Right.
And if you phono preamp for that.
So you need a phono preamp for that. So you have to have a phono input. There's no doubt about that. I just question whether or not you need to have you have to spend a whole lot of money on a phono preamp or an analog preamp in order to get really high-end performance. If it were me, I would buy the cheapest one I can get my hands on, and I would plug it in and go, am I hearing hiss? Am I hearing, former noise? Am I hearing a fan going on? Am I hearing anything other than the music? Because really, at that point, if the signal's going through unaltered, then everything else is just marketing BS. Now, if you see something like a really high-end preamp, it's super expensive, but it's a beautiful, and to your eye, it's a beautiful piece of art, and it's a conversation piece. I got no problems with that. But yes, I would say if you have to have an analog preamp, the Emotiva is a fine way to go. It certainly is going to be more of a conversation piece than just another receiver. Which many receivers these days come with phono preamps built in, and pre-outs to attach to your amplifier. There's no reason you can't use one of those as long as the amps aren't affecting anything, and then you're going to get all the advantages of having something like, I don't know, Odyssey or Yamaha. If you go with Yamaha, their Y-Power or something like that. Plus, you'll get bass management that isn't all wonky like the XPS one is. You're gonna get Odyssey DSX or something else. But if you don't want any of those things, all you want is an analog preamp. I'm sure the XPS is a fine way to go.
XSP, we better be careful because there is an XPS, and that is their.
I know.
Yeah, I know. Their separate little photo unit.
XSP1. That's the one, XSP1. The XPS1 is probably a, I don't know. I think that
Yeah,
might be. Is that
no,
little
that
phono
yeah,
thing?
that's their little $141 phono preamp
Yeah,
stage
that's
that
what I
is
thought.
all separate, all by
Which you
itself.
could also use with
Uh-huh.
any old receiver, and
Yes, you
then
could.
so you won't have to worry
That's
about
exactly what it's for. It's
it.
for
Go
any
on, Rob.
second receiver integrated
All
amp
right,
that
let
doesn't have
Rob
a
answer
phono in.
this one.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I don't have any problem if you want to get into vinyl. That is not the part that you're gonna hate my answer about, because I'm totally cool with that. I This definitely sounds. I'm inferring some stuff here based on Michael's email, but I'm thinking he might be getting into what a lot of the guys get into, which is I just want everything to be analog. I don't want there to be any digital anywhere in my signal chain. It sounds to me a little bit like that's what he's going after if he's looking at a unit like the XSP1. Um, if that's what you're after, I mean, it's not the way I'd go about things, but I'm not going to tell you that it's a horrible way to go or something like that. I would easily choose the Emotiva XSP1 over all of the, like some of the ones he was listing were like, $8, $9,000 units,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, they're not. They're going to do less than what the Emotiva does. If they're going to sound different, they're probably going to sound worse. Like a lot of them, they are the type you open it up and there's nothing inside. There's like,
There's literally an empty box. Yes.
yeah, and
It'll
the
be.
only reason it's heavy is because the box itself was like machined out of aluminum, and it's this big thick thing, and there's nothing inside. Like there's so many things that are basically a complete ripoff. Like Tom says, if it's purely about the aesthetics or getting yourself a conversation piece, then okay, but just don't try to fool yourself that you're getting better sound because of that. So if this is really about the sound quality, and you're in the camp that says I don't want anything digital to get into this signal anywhere, then I would totally go for the XSP1. It's actually a really good unit. It does have bass management. It has analog bass management because, of course, that was the whole point, was to not have anything digital. But at least it has bass management, so you can do what anybody should do, which is not have your front left and right speakers attempt to play all the bass, and instead use a pair of subwoofers optimally placed at the midpoints of opposing walls so that you can enjoy a nice linear uniform bass throughout your room, which a ton of people who are getting into two-channel vinyl only, they don't want that, but I'm still going to stick to my guns very much so on that. But my real answer would be, this isn't the way I would do things. I would get a receiver. I would get one that has a good pre-out stage, and the current Denon lineup. Gene just reviewed the X5200. That is a $2,000 receiver, but that's certainly not out of what Michael was considering price-wise. He just measured that. It has a fantastic pre-out stage. It has really good amplifiers too if you just want to run it off of the built-in amps. So, that's not going to be the issue there performance-wise on a unit like that. And then you get all the benefits of, you get digital bass management, you get Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32 with sub-EQ HT. You're not going to find that on any stereo-only preamp. That's like guaranteed. So all
By
the benefits.
definition, actually. I mean, you literally you can't get that stuff there.
Yeah,
So yeah.
to me, all the benefits that you can have just by going with a good AV receiver, to me, that outweighs what you're getting in a two-channel only, analog only preamp. But I'm almost certain that's not the answer that anyone who's getting into that wants to hear. But yeah, that's the way I would approach things. So anyway, I'll say that. And I'll leave it there.
Okay.
No need to fight.
There you go. Yeah. There's. Yeah. Anyways, like I said, I don't really have a problem. If you're really into this whole analog thing, that's what you gotta do. That's fine. But it's like
I'm
it's
sure
like
he's
it's like speaker cables. The only thing, if it can pass it through without changing it, that's the best. So why would it something else claim to be better than just passing it through? Because that's all Emotiva is
Yeah.
trying to do. That's the case. They're certainly not trying to make a difference. And they actually post pictures of the inside of their units, so you can see how empty they
And
are.
measurements.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying, I'm sure he's, if this is what he's getting into, I'm sure he's looking around at reviews. I mean, Stereophile has become something of a little bit of a joke amongst people who are really looking for objective reviews at this point, which is a shame given the pedigree of what that publication used to be. But, I'm sure he's looking at reviews like this and some of the claims that are being made, and then some of the things that are being said about a unit like Emotiva's XSP1, where it's like, for a mere $1,000, it's amazing how good it is, but of course it's nowhere near as good as this 12,000, 30,000 something or other, stereo only thing that only
I
has
hate
like
that.
one
I hate
input
that.
and that. And it's, that is all bunk. That is all just completely untrue. And I'm not saying there's no difference in sound. I'm saying that if there is a difference in sound, that like $12,000, $30,000 one probably sounds worse. Like objectively, if you measured the outputs that are coming out of its preamp outputs, it probably is worse because if you're hearing a difference, it was screwing something up.
Well,
That's why it
maybe,
sounds
but
different.
I would reckon to say, I guess if I had to make a guess, whenever I see something like this, when people are talking about like the minutia of the, it's a little bit airier, a little bit this, yeah, it's all in their heads. That's what I honestly think. I think they sit there and they go, "This is 30 grand, and this is $1,000." There's no
That's right.
way that the 30 grand doesn't sound a little bit better,
Yes,
at
right.
least a
Yeah.
little bit better.
But that's the same mentality that gets us these crazy claims about the uber expensive cables and power cables and stuff like that. Because either they're just completely fooling themselves into thinking they hear a difference because this thing costs so much, or if there was a real difference, and sometimes there is, it's because the super expensive one screwed up the signal.
Hey man, when
That's
you put
why
a
you can hear
battery
a
in your
difference.
cable, you screwed it unless it's not connected, unless it's just sitting there. And even then, that's just stupid. That being said, I don't want you to think that we think you're stupid, Michael.
Oh
I think
gosh, no. Oh.
that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is that if you're going to go straight on analog and you want to have analog-based management and that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Emotiva is the way to go. If you get that home
Mm-hmm.
and you listen to it and it sounds good, I would just say I would tell people it costs 30 grand. All right, Andrew, would like to say would like to create. Let me try this again. This is because there's a word any when it means and that's why it's screwing me up. Andrew would like to create a correction filter using his HTPC. He knows that Room EQ Wizard can do that sort of thing, which is a program that you can download for free. You just have to sign up for the Home Theater Shack. Is that what it is?
That's the place. Yep.
And you can download it
Free to
for
sign
free.
up.
I downloaded it and then I had to delete it because I had to wipe my computer for reasons that have to do with Maverick. He knows that Room EQ Wizard can do that sort of thing, but how do you go from having Room EQ Wizard measure your room with a corrected microphone from our friends over at Cross Spectrum Labs, Herb or Cross Spectrum Lab, who give you a measure a correction file for a microphone that will have that microphone measure as good as it possibly can. So how can you go from that Room EQ Wizard using that microphone to record to measure a room and then coming up with a with a filter to correct that room? How do you go from that to actually getting it into your system somehow? Because when you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, you're like, yeah, how do I go from that? Because now I've got this essentially this file, which doesn't really seem, what do I do with this filter? Now, what you're gonna the question you have to ask yourself, Andrew, is where are you looking for your room correction to be? Because most people who are using this are using it between their receiver and their subwoofer. Okay, because the
Right.
subwoofer is where most of this room correction has to happen. Everything else is technically doable. It would be a nightmare. That's why there's whole teams of people over Odyssey and Yamaha and I think that's pretty much it. I think those pioneer people are all fired, or they're you working at Onkyo now. But there's teams of people that try to do the rest of the speakers because that's that takes a lot of processing power and everything else, and you have to measure and do all sorts of weird things. So, but let's just talk about the subwoofer because technically, what you do with the subwoofer, you can do with everything else. What you would need to get is is put a device between the receiver and the amplifier that's in the subwoofer. That means it's in the signal change, right? So you go your RCA output from your subwoofer output to some box, and then from that box to the amplifier and the subwoofer, and then the signal that comes out of your receiver says, "Okay, I want you to play this frequency at this volume." It goes into this magic box, and that magic box says, "Ah, I have a filter." And every time you ask for that frequency, every time you ask for that frequency, I bump the volume down X amount. 2 dB because I know based on what Room EQ Wizard said that if you play it at the volume that you're asking, it actually sounds worse. I really need it 2 dB lower. Like, oh, okay, so it knocks it down 2 dB and then sends the signal out. Okay, that magic box is Rob.
The mini DSP is easily the choice right now. It goes for about $100, and there are various versions of them. There are ones that have 2 inputs. There are ones that have 8 inputs. There are ones that have balanced inputs. So lots of versions available, but if it is that your subwoofer, which is easily the place where you'll be using this first, the 2-channel version is totally sufficient for that. You could EQ separately 2 subwoofers. So there you go. That should do everything you need. I mean, in the old days, it used to be the Behringer feedback destroyers. That's the way that this was. That's
why I never did it.
Typically done. But now, the mini DSP is probably by far the easiest way to go. It's a small box. It's easy to use, and Room EQ Wizard is already set up to use it. So
basically,
can
you
create
plug that.
correction files.
You take the box, you plug it into your computer. You say Room EQ Wizard. Tell it what to do. It does that. You take it out of your, you disconnect it from your computer. You put it into your signal chain, and that's it.
Yep.
Okay. So that's how you do it. Now, technically, you could do that for every speaker and get one of those 8-channel ones.
Yeah, but you would need to have separate amplifiers if you want to do it on your speakers. You would need to be using either a preamp or using a receiver that has pre-outs for all the speakers because, again, it has to go from the processor, which is either your receiver or your preamp, out to the mini DSP, and then from the mini DSP to your amplifier. That's where it fits in the signal chain. So this isn't something you could just take an AV receiver and somehow get the filters out of your computer and into the AV receiver, and then have the AV receiver power the speakers directly.
If you wanted to do that, you would have to do that through something like the Odyssey Pro system.
Exactly.
And that's how that would work. You would buy the Odyssey Pro stuff, and then you would be able to measure your room, and you wouldn't be using Room EQ Wizard anymore. You would be using whatever their software is.
Now, there is one other case, which is if your home theater PC is your only source, as in you're driving your speakers directly from your home theater PC. So you're taking your home theater PC, using 7.1 analog audio outputs from the PC, and sending those straight into an amplifier, and driving your speakers that way, which you can do. Then you could still use the mini DSP, because it could go from the analog outputs of your computer into the mini DSP, then from the mini DSP to your amplifiers, or like we talked about, what was it? Was it last week we talked about Dirac, or was it that's 2 weeks ago now?
I don't know.
Whatever it was. Dirac has their room correction software that runs inside the PC and does everything inside the PC and then sends out the corrected audio from the PC directly. Now that is like $700 software, but that is one other way of doing it. But the Dirac solution will only work if your home theater PC is your only source. Yeah.
So both of you on the planet that are doing that can use that. All the rest of us will not be doing that. Yeah. All right. Robert VTW, which I think is, I don't know.
Well, it's one of those Vander something names.
Yeah. Anyways, Robert donated to the podcast, and then we somehow missed his question. That was not on purpose, obviously, and when he reminded us, thank you for reminding us. We immediately shoved you in right up here at the front. Does it feel like the front? But believe me, this is the front. We haven't even gotten to the topics for this week yet. Sorry. He's got a Frankenstein system, which is perfectly okay. It's a great place to start, and he's pieced together over time. It's an oddly shaped room in his condo. There's no way we're going to be able to describe this to you. He sent us like a thumbnail-sized picture, so we're having a hard time seeing it. But let's just say, okay. Let's pretend you have a rectangular room. Okay, let's pretend you have a rectangular room, and you put all your furniture on one side of this rectangular room. On the on the long wall. Okay, so there's a rectangular room. On the long wall is your seating. On the across from that, on the other long wall, is your TV. Okay, now take that TV and push just one corner of that wall, the one closest to the top there, and push that 45 degrees out. Okay,
make it diagonal. Yep.
Make it diagonal. So now your TV is diagonal. All right. And then to the left of the TV now opens up onto a balcony, and the other side opens up into the rest of the house or something, and you're still sitting, on. It's very odd. Anyways, that's what his house kind of looks like. Okay, so I kind of described it. He says the TV is placed in a sort of corner nook. The seats are pushed up against the opposite wall, and the right side is open to the dining area and kitchen. Glass balcony doors and a bedroom take up the left side. That's if you're sitting on the couch. So the left would be the balcony. The right would be a big opening. Robert wants to upgrade his sound system a little bit at a time, but isn't sure where to start. He can only accommodate one subwoofer, can only really go in one place. He doesn't think that his little 8-inch Athena subwoofer is getting the job done right now. So should he start there? What about possible speaker, AV receiver, acoustic treatment upgrades? Well, dude, you seriously need to upgrade where you put this stuff to begin with. But that's not really something that we can talk about, because obviously this is where you live and this is where it can go. Did he tell us, other than the fact that they were Frankenstein, what kind of speakers he had?
Yeah, he did. I mean, it is a mishmash of speakers. I did have that email somewhere there, but all of them are re-reported designs. He's a little bit concerned. He's not really happy with the way that his center speaker is sounding right now. He's thinking it's because it's reported. I'm thinking it has a little bit more to do with the speaker itself and where it's placed.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little bit tricky to go through a setup like this and really say, okay, this for sure is going to be the number one thing that is going to improve your sound. To me, even more important than nice bass, because I mean, heaven knows we like nice bass around here, but even more important than that is being able to hear clear dialogue.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with that whatsoever, and it sounds like he is, then that's like absolute number one priority. So yeah, I've opened this up. He's got Celestion F1 bookshelf front speakers. He's got
No idea what those are.
yeah, he's got an Athena LSC100 center, which he's not too happy about. The 8-inch sub is an ASP300, and then his surrounds are from a company called Real Acoustics. That's REEL. It's their RSX surrounds, which are bookshelf surrounds. So it is a Frankenstein system. His receiver is a Denon AVR 1910. So I can say, first of all, the AV receiver, that wouldn't be the first upgrade. I think that receiver is fine. You're fine for now on that. Yeah, I myself, in his situation, would start with his front three speakers. As much as I want to agree with him and say that the subwoofer should be your number one upgrade, to me, it isn't. I would either go with beginning by upgrading his front three speakers, or I might look into trying to somehow put some acoustic panels on that wall right behind his seat, because a good portion of why the dialogue might not be so clear right now is because he's got his seats right up against the wall that's right behind them. And that is very often the reason why dialogue is hard to understand.
Yeah, so, I can see that. Yeah. I agree with both those things. With a Frankenstein system, like my experience with Frankenstein systems, like I had one that, and it was like I had a ripped woofer in like one of them, so it was one of my better speakers, but I had to move it to the back because I didn't want it playing all the time up at the front, and I tried everything. I duct taped the whole 9 yards, and I certainly didn't have the money to fix it. So when I got an I think I ended up buying getting a pair of bookshelf speakers, and I finally got rid of that. It was really nice to get rid of that rip, but I never really felt like it was an upgrade. It just felt like, that annoying thing is gone. Having a center channel that you can understand, I think, will make a very big difference. I think that the subwoofer upgrade is something that I personally think that you're probably really excited about because we talk about it so much, and I think it would be an upgrade. That 8-inch Athena subwoofer probably isn't doing much for you, all right? But then again, it's not really the big problem here, is it? The big problem is that you've got sort of a Frankenstein thing going on. You don't really know. Having the subwoofer be better and play lower and do all these things isn't going to help your dialogue. It may actually make things in the room, and depending on how the room is reverberant and what things are going on in there, may actually make some things worse.
And given that he can't play with the placement at all, so right now we don't know how much of the dissatisfying performance is due to placement either. So
and this is a condo, so he owns it, so or is in the bank owns it, and he's
slowly paying them back.
Could vary. If this is going to be some place where you're going to be living for a while, well, then you can make a decision about speakers that's a little bit more permanent. You can say, okay, in this space, what sort of speakers can I live with? What kind of speakers do I want? What kind of speakers? Now, if you're thinking in the future, I might be moving or changing or I don't want to buy anything I'm going to be too locked down on. Then you can listen to I think last podcast or the podcast before that where we talked about the guy looking for the small speakers, and we talked without ports. Who was
Mm-hmm.
that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was Tim. That was Tim, and certainly like those NHT Super Zeros,
That's the
those
first
little
thing that came to
speakers.
my mind. You get
Yeah.
five of those bad boys for $500. You're gonna go, okay, yes, I hear things now, and you can put those things anywhere. And later on, when you've got a condo, later on, when if you do decide to upgrade or if you move or something like that, man, you can just place those things all over the house, and just get yourself a little wireless amp or something and you've got a distributed audio system. And
Hmm.
I'm telling you, you can die with those speakers. You will play them till they literally die. That being said. I agree. I think putting something behind your head is something I wouldn't have thought of, but now that Rob says it, it probably it makes a lot of sense to me. So if you want to test it out, get yourself a nice thick blanket
Hmm.
and just ball it up behind your head, like right behind that couch, like just
Yep.
stuff the back of your couch right, as high as you can, and see where it goes. Now, if you don't know, maybe he's got home theater seating, and they're really high chairs, and then he's not having this. But if it's a
Looks
normal
like a
couch.
couch.
Yeah, if it's I would give that at least a try. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things is that, of course, strictly price-wise, those little NHT Super Zeros wouldn't appear to be an upgrade to the speakers he already has. Strictly just going by price. And if that's a concern, and if you wanted ones that can play a little lower and play a little louder, and maybe have a little bit more controlled dispersion, because to me, one thing I would choose if he is staying in this
Yeah.
location for a while,
The
one of the
caps.
things I would look for is a little bit more controlled dispersion out of your speakers rather than really wide dispersion. So to me, this is another great case where Kef's Q series speakers, I think would be a really big upgrade for you, even regardless of everything else. I think you'd be pretty darn impressed if you got some Kef Q series speakers.
Yeah.
Another one would be those Golden Ear Supersat speakers with their folded ribbon tweets, because I have to tell you they work really well in compromised placements as far as just keeping everything sounding
I
really
have to
deep.
hear those. I need to hear
Yeah,
those. I haven't heard
yeah.
those.
I
I
mean,
gotta get out to a home theater place around here now that my leg's a little bit better. So
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with those. I mean, as far as like aesthetics and size go, I mean, they're only like 2.5 or 3 inches thick from front to back, the Supersats.
yeah,
And they're really nice looking. So, often in a condo you want something that's kind of slim and unobtrusive in looks too. So the Supersats would satisfy that, and they do sound nice in compromised placement. So hopefully that gives you some options to think about. And that's where I would start. Yeah.
yeah. That's where I would start too. I would start with a big pillow behind your head for a little while and see
Oh
how
yeah,
that
for
sounds.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe doing something with that center channel and seeing if you can kind of finagle it,
Mhm.
like put it in some place you wouldn't normally put it, just to see if it just really sucks, which could be the case. All right, so discussion topics for this week, an hour into the podcast.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
See how
Let
many
me
we can
see.
do.
According to where my little scroll bar, I don't have a scroll bar. No, I can't even tell you how much do we have to go. Lots. Dawn. Started by saying they realizes that, of course, it depends on what speakers you're already using and what your room's acoustics are like to begin with. But assuming you have some good $1,000 pair of bookshelf speakers and maybe a couple of absorption panels already in a medium-sized room, would spending an additional $2,000 on upgraded speakers or the same amount on more room treatments make a bigger improvement?
Hmm.
It's an interesting question, Don.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I
So,
like it. It's a good question.
it's a good question. It is a good question. Now, Don, let's talk about this. You can get a really crappy pair of speakers for $2,000 if you try. So let's assume that you're not going to do that. You're going to get yourself an upgrade. You had some pretty good, or some good. Let's say we'll call them good. So you're going to go from good to $1,000 pair of bookshelf speakers, and a couple of absorption panels too, and now you're going to spend an additional $2,000 on upgrades. Does that mean 3,000? Well, let's just say it's 2,000.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
just say 2,000.
Either way.
So you're going to sell your $1,000 bookshelf speakers, and you're going to get another, chalk up another $1,000 and get $2,000. There, in my opinion, there's a fairly substantial difference in my mind between $1,000 a pair for speakers, bookshelf or otherwise, and right around 2,000 there starts to be a pretty big difference between those two. You can it starts around $1,500, but by $2,000, almost all the speakers are going to be substantially, at least on many metrics, better than the $1,000 speakers. So it's pretty easy to get yourself some pretty nice speakers for $2,000. $2,000, if you could bump it up to 2,500. If you're really going to 3,000, you can get some really nice speakers for 3,000. All right,
Sure can.
yeah, I mean really nice speakers for 3,000. So on the other side, for $2,000, I can almost fill a room with acoustic treatments. But that's because I'm a
Not that more is always better, but you could
that's what I'm
certainly
saying.
go to town.
But I'm going to do it myself. All right. I mean, I'm going to DIY most of that. I'm going to buy some lumber. I've got a router. I've got a compound miter saw, and that's pretty much and I've got a framing nailer. Like it's a air powered one too. So like a pop pop. Man, I'm going to knock those things out in a couple of hours. It's going to be sweet. That being said, if you decided not to do that, $2,000 will get you a room that's barely treated if you pay somebody to do it. So,
right?
there's a pretty wide range there. If I would have a hard time, honestly, in my room, I would have a hard time spending $2,000 treating in a medium-sized room. I mean, I think it would be hard to do that. I think I would have
I could do that pretty easy.
Well, you could, but I mean, then you're starting to I would get fancy. I'd get like the ones with the pictures on them and stuff like that. But I mean, I just don't need that much stuff mostly. I want to have some reflective surfaces in there. I don't want everything to be coupled with absorption or diffusion or whatever. I don't want it to be all sort of weird and cavish. I would, I mean, I would have a hard time doing that. So my opinion. If you've already got a couple of absorptive panels, and you've got $1,000 a pair of bookshelf, and you've got $2,000 to spend total, I'd buy myself I'd upgrade the speakers. That's what I would do.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. Honestly, the first thing I would do is I would do what is free, and that would be to get in touch with GIK Acoustics and use their free room analysis, and see what they say.
Doesn't Auralex still do that too?
Auralex does that too. Yep, they have a free room analysis. So I would make use of every free service from any of the acoustic panel companies. Coming up in our next question, there's ATS Acoustics. They have a free consultation thing too. So now that they're all offering these free consultations, there's zero cost reason not to take advantage of that and see how much they agree amongst each other. I happen to really quite trust GIK Acoustics. They line up very much with what I already think, but that's one man's opinion, and getting a whole bunch of opinions on this, absolutely not a bad idea, especially when it's free. So I would start there because it does depend. I mean, there are medium-sized rooms with a couple of acoustic panels in them that are already carpeted or something like that, and they're already pretty good acoustic spaces. And they might get back to you and say, well, you know what, we'd probably add a couple bass traps here, maybe put a couple diffusers on the ceiling, but after that, it'd just be really subtle if you went any more. Maybe that's what they'll tell you. Or they might say, you're living in a glass box that's a cubic shape. I mean, it's still a medium-sized room as far as volume of air, but it's a concrete bunker and with a concrete floor, and they'll say, you're going to need quite a bit. You're going to need to do something to knock down the reverberation. Maybe you've got that marble floor and concrete walls that Rohan is dealing with.
I was going to say, maybe your name is Rohan, and they're going to say, we can't tell you how to fix that.
That's right. So to me, that's where you start, because get some opinions on how far you probably do need to go acoustic treatment-wise, because $2,000-$3,000 speakers in a really bad acoustic space that's really reverberant, that isn't going to sound better than your $1,000 bookshelf speakers in a much improved space if you're in a really bad space. So which one's going to make the bigger difference depends on what you're starting with. I mean, he acknowledges that, but to me, there's no reason not to get some free advice and start with that. But yeah, once you get to a situation where the room isn't your majorly limiting factor, there was a good talk on the just this past week on Home Theater Geeks, and they were talking about what a sorry state it is in both movies and music, as far as there really are no standards like performance metrics that various theaters and various recording studios and dubbing stages all have to meet and sort of agree upon, that each sound recording engineer goes in and sets up things the way he or she likes them, and like that's your only standard. So trying to say, oh, there's a perfect solution to this, that isn't really the case. But you can pretty much find out if your room is like a horrible space, in which case that's your limiting factor, and that's where you have to go first. So that isn't a huge help, but once the room's basically under control, then absolutely going to like $2,000 or $3,000 repair speakers can make a big difference. So
Yeah.
there.
On the other side of that too is I don't know what the price is. I was trying to look it up while you were talking.
Mhm.
But on the Oralex they have the room analysis, which is free, and they have the room analysis plus,
Mhm.
which costs money, but they'll actually sell you a microphone and the whole 9 yards to go with it. I think you need you probably need some sort of preamp for that. But it looks like one you would need a preamp for, but I don't know. But the Room Analysis Plus, where you measure, they send you test tones, you measure your speakers in your room, and then you send in the dimensions of your room and some pictures, and then they will take that and tell you exactly where to put things. And that usually, I think that costs, I can't remember what it costs. I want to say 300, 400, $500 someplace in there. If I had $2,000 to spend on room treatments, I'd easily spend some of it on that.
Mhm.
There's actually a pro version too, where somebody comes out and does the measurements for you,
Right. Yeah.
which is a little unnecessary. But you can look into that as well. So that's not a bad suggestion. So Rob's got a point there. All right.
Yay.
Ryan's got an open concept room, a limited budget of about $300 to begin with, and 3 small children to keep an eye on. $100 per kid. He wants to improve the sound quality in his room while keeping the space kid-friendly. He doesn't want that, like, things on stands that can get knocked over. Probably aren't a good idea, though. I will tell you from my personal experience, I have knocked over more things than my kids have. So, how much stuff have you knocked over? Because believe me, my kids have not knocked over hardly anything. Given his restraints, he isn't sure where to start when it comes to acoustical treatments. He's found ATS, which seem to sell very inexpensive panels. But other than that, he wants to know where to begin. ATS is a company I hadn't really heard of.
Neither had I, yeah.
But
And I mean, they do look inexpensive. It was funny. I looked over at Acoustimac because Acoustimac used to be where I would go for sort of like the least expensive panels or different shapes that GIK didn't offer as just standard. There would be an upcharge if you got them from GIK to make them custom. For some reason, Acoustimac's prices have all gone up like quite considerably. At least the last time I visited their
they're
site,
suffering
which
from
was
that
just a couple days
axiom,
ago.
the axiom disease axiom got.
I'm not sure. Yeah. So, yeah, the ones over at ATS, they're on average they look like $10 to $20 less expensive than GIKs. The ATS panels don't have any sort of frame that incorporates an air gap in between, but of course you can use whatever hanging method you want to place your own air gap behind the panel if you want to do that. So a lot of their panels, the ATS ones, actually have like a solid back. And I'm not a huge fan of the way that their standard way of connecting it to the wall, which is basically just Z clips. So you have to sort of drill into your wall, secure the Z clip to your wall, and then drill into the back of the panel and secure the other Z clip to that panel, and then slide one Z clip into the other.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, so it's you got to be really careful making sure everything's level and exactly where you want it if you're going to be screwing everything permanently into your walls. So I'm not a huge fan of all the design choices there, but you can get them as just open back. You can come up with your own connection method after you do all that. I don't know if they'd be any cheaper than GIKs. So,
Right.
yeah. But anyway, I don't have any qualms with the design of their panels because it's the standard design for acoustic panels.
Okay. So let's just get into this. His room, basically. When you walked into the room, you're going to be walking into the kitchen, and all the way in front of you, all the way across the room, is where the home theater is, but to the right. To the left, so as you walk into the left is the kitchen, and then as you further in, to the left is the table. I guess that's the dining area. To the right, across from the table, all the way at the back of the room here, would be the back of the couch, and then to the right in front of that would be not to the right, but as you're walking in on the right wall would be all his speakers and stuff.
Yeah. So another way to think of it, it's like an L-shaped room. You're in the small part of the L for your theater. Behind you is the dining area, and over to the right is the kitchen and a big opening to sort of a hallway type thing. So
yeah. So his issue here is that basically, if you think about it, everything's shoved up into one corner. His couch is kind of in the middle of the room. The TV and stuff is all the way up in the corner. It's on that wall, but the speakers and stuff are all the way to as far to the left as possible. And his right surround is all the way across the kitchen and everything else. It's like, according, I mean, I'm sure this is not to scale, but it looks like it is. If the left surround is right off the couch, the right surround is 3 couches away.
Now
Okay.
that is surely because he was saying he doesn't want anything on stands, because otherwise I would be having my right surround speaker on a stand next to
Yes.
my couch. But
Yes.
that must be right.
That's what I would immediately suggest. But everything else is kind of in front of him. Now, you're looking. You got $300 budget. You've got no budget. Really, what you've got very little budget here.
You can buy like 3 panels. Yeah.
Yes. The kind of rule of thumb is you can buy a 4-inch panel and put it on the wall, like right flush to the wall, or you can take a 2-inch panel, put a 2-inch air gap, and then you get about the same performance. Okay. So if you had a 4-inch panel, you put it 4 inches off the wall. It's like the same as having an 8-inch panel. It's not exactly right, but it's sort of the rule of thumb. Okay. So if depending on how much absorption you want, you can look at those 4-inch panels and say, if you put it straight on the wall, I can get that same performance out of a 2-inch panel, and I have to put a 2-inch air gap somehow. Okay, GIC incorporates those,
Hmm.
or you have to figure out some way to do it yourself. If you're having imaging issues, which I'm guessing you're worried about, and certainly you have a problem with your right surround, unless it's a laser beam, is that you have that left wall that's right on your left front speaker, and he has a height speaker too up there, which is probably not helping the situation. And the right front speaker is kind of firing out into the kitchen area, it looks like. Okay, so I mean it's facing him, but it's going to be the side reflections are going to be non-existent. Okay,
From
so
the right front speaker.
this is
Yeah,
very
and then.
similar to the sort of layout that Gene has in his room. Not exactly, but it's similar to the layout that Gene has in his room. So what I think it was Oralex did when they came and treated his room is they took that left wall and
Hmm.
just put as much absorption up there as they really could.
Yeah.
They're trying to do is just kill every reflection coming off that wall so that it would mirror what's happening on the other side. Because
Hmm.
that's what's happening when it's just shooting off into the kitchen. It's going to go bouncing around the kitchen. And I know it's an open concept. It's eventually going to come back, but it's really for acoustically, it's really gone. Okay, it's
Yeah.
gone for right now.
Yeah, to the right side of the room, the sound is traveling a much greater distance before it reflects off something and then comes back to your seat. And so, of course, sound gets quieter as it travels a greater distance. So the reflections you're getting from the right side of your room are much, much weaker than the reflections you're getting from the left side of your room, where there's a wall right beside your seat. So, yeah, the whole idea is to really kill the reflections off that left wall so that it better matches the weakness of the reflections that's coming from the right-hand side. If you've only got a couple $100 to spend to begin with, that's where you're going to start. I mean, normally in most rooms, you probably start with bass trapping because if what you're dealing with is not a reflection problem, it's more of a reverberation problem, most of your reverberation is going to be happening in your lowest frequencies. So that's why the common advice is to start with bass trapping. But in this case, it's the reflections off that left wall. That's what you want to start with first, and some absorption there on that left
Yeah.
wall.
So if you can get like some 2-inch panels, get them 2 inches off the wall, and then or 4 inch. God help if you can get 4-inch panels and get them 4 inches off the wall and treat that first reflection point.
Or, 4-inch panels that are an inch and a half or 2 inches off the wall.
Yeah, anything's better than nothing at that point. And
Oh, yeah.
just you know, that's what you want. That's what you're going for. Once you do that, then you can see where you're at. But if that's what you want to spend it on, is that then on acoustic panels and not something to get that right surround speaker closer to your head. Dude, put it on the chair. No one needs to sit in that. He's got a chair right next to his couch. You just mount it to the chair. How about that? Person in the
Yeah, now
chair.
see, Ryan's is a case where he has lots of space behind his seats. Very often I'm saying, even if it isn't bass traps, even if it isn't first reflection points off the side walls, one of the first places I would often put absorption is right behind the seat because so many people have their seat pushed right up against the back wall and that kills your dialogue intelligibility. But Ryan, he's got lots of space behind his seat. So, it is specific to the way things are set up as to where the best place is to begin. In this
Yeah,
one, I think it's pretty clear.
yeah, it's pretty clear. All right. John S. has moved into his new house. A few months ago, he wrote to us advice about his large open concept living room in his new house. We ended up recommending Kef speakers. I think Rob did, and I said
Hmm.
okay. and backer boxes for his in-ceiling speakers, and pre-wiring for 2 possible subwoofer locations. John and his family are all moved in now, and they just had twins. Yay! So sleep is a higher priority. Congratulations. I always wonder if you get a matched pair or if you got the identical ones. I mean, I guess fraternal, but the matched pair is always kind of nice. Then you get a Peter Pan sort of thing going on. I don't know why I think of that. They should just. Anyways, all right. I'm off. I don't know what that was about. Sorry. If I ever edited this podcast, that would be gone. So sleep is a higher priority than home theater right now, but nevertheless, John wants to continue towards his surround sound goal. So he has a few questions. Number 1, he's now planning to use a long console at the front of his room rather than the cabinet. Yay! For the center speaker and bookshelves to hold the front, left, and right speakers, since there will be an open air behind the speakers now. Should he still go with the KEF speakers? He's kind of interested in the Pioneer Elite speakers, which will also use the concentric drivers. That's the tweeter in the center of the woofer. Since he's really enjoyed the inexpensive Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers. He already bought the KEF speakers?
No, but he did already install the backer boxes for the in-ceiling KEF speakers. He specifically contacted KEF and found out what the dimensions of those backer boxes should be and already built them into the ceiling. My opinion, stick with the plan because you're still going to be using those KEF in-ceilings. There is absolutely no way I think you're going to be disappointed with the KEF front speakers that we had already talked about, the Q series. I wouldn't anticipate the Pioneer Elite speakers, being any sort of gigantic upgrade over those KEFs.
No, I don't think so.
Because those KEFs sound darn good, and I see no reason to change that plan. I'd stick with it myself.
All right. Second, since he'll now have a long console in the front of the room, he was thinking he could use a DIY absorption panel that could run the entire length of the console along the front wall. His large room is pretty reverberant, but other than a thick rub, he can't add much else in the way of acoustic treatment, so it would be best to make the panel as large as possible, or should only use smaller panels directly behind each of the front speakers.
Big as possible.
There's no reason not to. At this point, it's kind of you're in the Rohan sort of situation, right? Where we're just looking for any sort of absorption at this point.
Yep.
You're getting the maximum amount of benefit from directly behind the speakers. You're catching that back wave. All right? But now I would say, put someone on the other side of the room so that you're catching the wave that's bouncing off the back wall. And put some to the side of the room that are catching that first reflection, and put some on the ceiling that's going to catch that first reflection, right? But you're saying you can't do any of that, so I'm like, well, if that's the only place you can put it, make it a mattress up there or something. You know what I mean?
If you've got a reverberant room, then just having absorption in the room wherever you can put it is a help, because you're just trying to stop echoes. That's all you're trying to do.
It's better than nothing. And
that's right.
That's yeah. At the very least, you'll deaden up, and there is a live end dead end. That's an acoustical thing that I don't think it really
not really practiced or recommended much anymore to do.
Yeah, but there was people that were really into it for a while, and those were people who did a lot of work on their rooms and then had to tear it all down when it started sounding, and they realized it didn't sound good no matter how much they wanted it to. Number 3. The only other place where he could put some absorption would be on the space above his kitchen cabinets up to the ceiling. Obviously, these wouldn't address reflections at all, but would having them up there be of any benefit at all, perhaps for a bit of bass trapping? Yes. Any corners or edges or where two walls meet, if you can put some absorption up there, that is good. That's bass trapping, baby. That is natural bass trapping, and anywhere you can put that. Like normally you can't put that on the ceiling because people look at you like you're a maniac or having stuff on going across the ceiling. I mean, I wish I could put some stuff up there, to be honest with that.
That's why GAK has those. They call it their soffit traps, because they made a big bass trap that looks like a soffit once you install it. So.
Yep. So, yes, there would be nothing bad about that whatsoever. That's a good idea. John's still planning on spending about $1,000 for a new subwoofer. Rob had previously suggested the HSU VTF 15H due to the 5,800 plus cubic foot size of John's room. John thought that the subwoofer was physically maybe a bit too big, but now HSU sub too big? Who's ever said such a thing? But now HSU has announced the new VTF3 Mark V HP. So between the new 15-inch VTF3 Mark V HP and the SVS PB2000, what would be better? Any chance that the larger 15-inch driver will sound slower than the smaller 12-inch driver? I hate that. I really do. It's like when it grates against my nerves, like people saying that metallic drivers sound tinny and paper ones or Kevlar ones. I heard somebody say this one. Kevlar ones sound there's too textured. The sound is too textured coming off it. I'm like, you're a freaking idiot. Now, but that's a real concern. People really talk about these slower, larger drivers being slower than the smaller 12-inch drivers. Normally, people saying that have 8-inch woofers, and they're like, "Well, my room sounds great with my 8-inch woofer." I'm like, "That's because you've never had a subwoofer. You should invest in one because that's not one." Yeah, I would not worry about it being slower. Not based on the size. You know, that's when we're talking about the damping factor. The damping factor is how fast that the driver itself can stop. You know, and that's what some people think that because it's bigger, it'll somehow be harder to stop. Well, why do you think they put those monster amps on these things? But why do you think they have these humongous magnets on them? That's so that they can grab that driver and stop it from moving as fast as possible. So no, I'm not worried about slow. What would be better between the 15-inch VTF3 Mark V and HP? God, I hate that name. And the SVS PB2000. Much easier to say. Thank you very much. We looked up the dimensions. They're almost identical, right? Except that the HSU is taller.
Yeah, it's 2 inches taller, but other than that, they're almost the same size. And I mean, both of them are smaller than the VTF-15H or the new VTF-15H Mark II. Those ones are taller and deeper, like significantly deeper. They're like half a foot even deeper. So, I mean, that VTF-15H is monstrous. It is a gigantic box. The PB2000 and the VTF-3 Mark V HP are both very large boxes, but they are smaller than the 15H.
Technically smaller. Yeah, but the new Mark V HP is just it would just crush. It's going to have so much output. SVS, I would normally kind of steer you towards the SVS, but I think in this case, with that much room, I think you would not be a terrible idea to have a little bit extra output in that room.
Yeah.
So
raw output wise, yeah,
I would lean towards the HSU in this case.
Yep.
So
I concur.
I keep thinking that lightning's going to strike me. Because I haven't recommended an SVS sub. I recommend somebody else's sub over the SVS. I feel like something bad's going to happen. Yeah, so I think that's the way I would go. But dude, seriously, build a cardboard box and put it next to the couch. Can you please do that so that your wife doesn't think I'm a big jerk? Can you please do that? Because if you don't do that, and she calls me and says bad things to me, I'm going to ask her. I'm with this first question. Do you show you a cardboard box? No. Then okay, not my fault.
And since it's out there now, don't forget that there is that PC2000 cylinder, which, yes, it's a cylinder, and a lot of times people think it'll look weird, but it takes up a lot less floor space. So if it's a floor space and you're okay with it being, kind of like, what is that? It's not quite, it's like 3.5 feet tall, right? It's not quite 4 feet tall.
Which one are you talking about? The 2000?
The PC2000, yeah.
Yeah, it's about as tall as a couch. It's like a normal sized couch. And mine is, and that couch is. I wouldn't say it was a short couch. I would say a normal standard sized couch, not with high backs and not one of those low European jobbies.
Right.
For something from like IKEA or whatever.
I like the cylinders, man, because they take up a lot less space. It makes sense to go tall instead of short and squat and gigantic.
Yeah. And those crush too. Anyways, all right. So JC. Installing a basement theater for his parents. They live in a hurricane zone, so tile floor, steel studs, and mold-resistant drywall are the order of the day. Tile floor. Okay.
He's not happy about it either, but it makes sense. If you're going to have a flooding basement, then I agree with these steps.
He's got a plan in mind already as far as home theater equipment goes, but acoustically, he just wants to know if you have any additional recommendation. He's going to try for as large an area rug as he can get in this 10 by 25 foot by 8 foot space. a couple of absorption panels on the side walls, a bookcase in the back wall for diffusion, and maybe some corner bass traps. Don't say maybe. Stop. Stop. Don't call me maybe, baby. Seriously, you need some bass trapping in this room. Okay, Rohan, if you need to give, Rohan will tell you, you need some bass trapping. Yeah, that sounds like actually a pretty good plan. You could put something on the ceiling, but the only thing that's
Yep.
popping up in my head, but bass traps, all four corners if you can get away with it.
Hmm.
Get as much of
And
it there as you can.
look into those GIK soffit traps that I mentioned, because if you're okay with having something that looks like a soffit going around your room, you can put in a whole bunch of bass trapping that way. And it looks like it belongs. It doesn't look out of place. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the only thing you might have overlooked is that you can use the ceiling. There you go.
All right. Second, he's likely going to paint the front wall to act as a projection screen. Do we have any recommendation for which paint he could use? Isn't that goo stuff?
There's the goo systems, the screen goo.
Yeah.
However, I mean, the screen goo, by all accounts, performs really, really well. Now, you do have to be awfully careful in how you apply it, and they give you full instructions on how to do it. But the whole drawback with painting a screen is that, first of all, you got to make sure your wall is really flat and smooth, because Lord knows when walls are constructed, they aren't actually flat and smooth.
No.
Now, the goo has an advantage. It is goo. It's not just paint. It's almost like putty, and so it can go on quite thick and basically work to give you a flatter, smoother surface, even if your wall's not quite perfect. But it's not cheap. Just the regular one that you would get is going to cost you about $300 or so, and that's just the screen goo. And then there's whatever you need to apply it, however you want to apply it. So, I mean, at that point,
You might as
over
well
at
just buy a fixed screen, dude.
buy an inexpensive screen. Yeah, because I mean, over at like the Wirecutter, they just did a really great article where they were looking at inexpensive screens. So the one that they chose is a brand called Silver Ticket. I don't know anything about them, but they certainly put up a whole bunch of them, head to head, and did full measurements and everything
Yeah.
like that. That's Chris Heinen, who did that over at Wirecutter. So, I like that. That's like a $200 to $250 screen, depending on the size. That's between 100 to 120 inches. So at that point, it's actually cheaper to get a screen, and that's got the frame and everything, right? The
Yeah.
goo, that doesn't include a frame. You'd be adding cost to make yourself a frame as well. Now, that said, if the whole point of this is to spend as little money as you possibly can on the screen, there was a great article that Projector Central put up. That was a number of years ago, but they went around and basically said, we've got $100. We want to make a nice screen for $100. You can't really do that with any fabric screens. So they tested a whole bunch of things. They found the Sherwin-Williams brand of paint, specifically one called their Pro Classic Smooth Enamel Satin. That's the one that they went up against in its basic white, absolutely zero tints applied to it. So just their absolute basic white of this Pro Classic Smooth Enamel Satin paint from Sherwin-Williams, which should be able to locate somewhere because that's a pretty large brand of paint. They say that as far as performance goes, measuring it against a de facto screen like a Stewart film screen, Studio Tech 100, which is just a completely neutral one gain screen. Say it performs pretty darn well. It's certainly not expensive. I think it's going to set you back like $40 for what you'd need, just the paint, and then of course you're constructing whatever frame you want around the screen. So I'll link up to that whole article. You can read through their whole rigmarole that they went through, but that's an easy recommendation there.
Yeah, generally, whenever somebody asks me a question about screens, I'm like, well, you can either look it up on Projector Central or I can look it up on Projector Central. You decide. But I'm happy to do it because that's exactly what I was going to say. I've projected on the screens on walls before. I've done that pretty regularly. The color of the paint really makes a big difference. You will notice that tints, you can't quite calibrate it right. The tints of people's faces will just be off. I had one projector that I was using where it said, well, is your wall kind of yellow? Because if it's kind of yellow, then do this. If your wall, it had like different settings for different color walls, and of course, none of them really worked. So if you get the right paint, it's kind of okay. If you're not fussy, and it's just parents, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, if your parents aren't fussy, they're not going to notice the texture. It's not going to be something that's going to bother them. Honestly, I think a fixed screen is pretty cheap.
If you're willing to go to like $200 or $250, which, like I say, after you factor
It's just going to
in,
be so much nicer.
yeah, it is a pretty easy
Factor
way to go.
factor in your labor. You know what I mean? Factor in your aggravation and time, and you got to buy I mean, at the very least, you're gonna have to get white paint and then black paint if you're gonna do it that way, which would look awful, by the way, because it's not gonna look as clean as you think it's gonna look, and that painter's tape is crap. I can never get that stuff to work right. Okay. And I actually paint pretty well. I do the cutting and the broom stuff like that. I do that pretty well. I'm like highly critical of myself when I do it, so it becomes sort of a deal. But I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't try to paint on the black part. So you're going to need, at the very least, wood. You're going to need some fabric. You're going to need enough fabric to cover it, and you want something like velvet to cover it. Then you have to nail it up there and get it up there so that it looks nice. Then you got to hope that you made it square. Then you have to paint everything else underneath it, which would be fine. It makes it easier when you know you're going to put a screen on it. I would put a frame around it, and then you're going to still have just a white wall, a white spot in your wall, which is not going to be as nice. When you factor in the labor and the extra costs and stuff like that, you're going to be over $100 anyways, and just round it up to $250. That's what I say.
Those silver certificate screens, by the way, are available right at Amazon, so it's easy to find and order them. So.
Yeah, there you go. All right. I almost kind of want to save this William thing because I think we'll take up the last half an hour with this.
Okay.
Okay. William, send us a review to tear apart, and we'll do that next week. Okay. I think we have to skip that for right now because that could easily suck up a lot of time. Greg is looking to upgrade his Marantz NR1403. That's a slimline receiver, right?
It's one of those. Yep.
Although he's sticking with a 5.1 setup using his KEF speakers and a pair of SVS PB1000 subs. He's sort of saying that what a bad year is to buy AV receiver because they issue a 2.0 and HDCP 2.2 copy protection issues. But does this also apply to separates? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. He's eyeing the Emotiva UMC 2000 and 200 and UPA 500 amp combo, but he also likes some of the features offered in the Marantz SR 7008, or even the Denon AVR X4100W. Will he hear a difference? Will the separates sound better? No. And aside, as much as I love Emotiva, and I do love Emotiva. Okay, first of all, your KEFs don't need separate amplification. They just don't. And I mean, there's just no reason why they would need a more robust amp section than you're going to get in the receiver that you mentioned, either of the receivers you mentioned. Okay, number one. Number two, the UMC 200 has been plagued with problems.
The UMC 200 wasn't as bad. I mean, the first one, the UMC 1 or 100, I forget
whatever that was.
The first one was
Is this the new one? Is this the new one? The UMC?
This is their newest one, yeah.
The newest is the one that's supposed to have Dirac. Does it have Dirac yet?
Oh no, that's their XMC one.
Oh right. Okay, that's what I thought. So the UMC 200, yeah, plagued with problems. Okay, now he's right. The older one was much worse, but it is the fact of the matter is that I love Emotiva, but their processors have not impressed nearly anyone. The best you can say is some people don't have problems with them. Do you want to be one of those people? Go ahead, buy one and see how it works out for you. But the amp is fine. I'm 100% behind the amp, and I've already recommended the processor, the analog processor. They didn't mess that one up, so it's good. Now, the reason though, all that aside, let's just say you get the perfect Emotiva processor that it plays nice with all of your gear. You got your amp and everything else. Will it sound better than the Marantz or the Denon? Does it have Odyssey?
Nope.
Then it will not. Okay. Sorry, that's just the way that works. I mean, the reason why Odyssey is incorporated into these things. I mean, does it have YPAL? Nope. Does it have any of these other things?
Well,
nope.
They do have I think they call it EmoQ auto setup. Yeah. It's a parametric equalizer.
Yes. It's not manual. Is that manual?
Well, you can do it manually,
yeah,
but
right,
there is an auto version in there, yeah.
My reading of that one has not been overly. People have been like, yeah, well, it kind of does something. It's not. People have not been overly impressed with it. just frankly, that's just not something I think that they're set up to do. You know, the cost behind doing all the stuff that you'd have to do. I mean, look at it. Onkyo is trying to cut costs on the receiver. So what's the first thing they cut out? They cut out Odyssey. Why? Well, because not only does Odyssey licensing cost money, but they have to they have to separate processing power just for Odyssey. Well, you know, there's a lot of technology going on there, and they've been doing it for a lot of years. So my opinion, you can take that for what it's worth, is that if you're not going to have a top-notch, and I consider Wipeout to be a top-notch one as well, room correction system, then and you put it up against something that does, which one do you think is going to sound better? Because it's certainly not because your amps have moved out and are now at college or whatever, the separate amplifier situation. Just taking the amps out of the box is not enough to make me believe that it's going to sound better. Just like when was it Rotel has a new processor out where they took the power supply out of the box of their highest end, I think it's analog only processor. Why? What makes you think that just taking it out of the box makes it better? It's still doing the same thing. The amplifiers are still doing the same thing. They're still connected. You've just taken those connections outside, and so you can see them. Now, if you had a big room, if you had hard to drive speakers, if you had a number of other issues, I would say, okay, well, maybe this is a good, a separate amplifier solution is a good choice for you. But in this case, I mean, if you were fine with the Marantz and the slimline one, there's no way that you're gonna have a problem with either of the other two. That's for sure.
So yeah, I actually have a different question, which is, what's making you unhappy about your NR1403?
Yeah, that's true.
He's not looking to add more speakers. I mean, that would be one definite reason if he wanted to go beyond 5 speakers, because the NR1403 tops out at 5. It has Odyssey multi-EQ. It doesn't have XT or XT32. It doesn't have sub-EQ HT. So if that's what you're going after, then I'm all for it, because the better versions of Odyssey certainly can make an audible difference. However, if he was considering the UMC 200, then Odyssey multi-EQ XT32 wasn't his top priority.
One would think. Unless he thinks that it's taking the amps out of the box, or is it somehow akin to that? And I think there's a lot of people that think that. I'm not.
Yeah, well, because I'm thinking he's probably, there's plenty of places you can go where they would tell you separates are always better than an AV receiver. There's plenty of places that will tell you that.
And it's a lie.
Yeah, exactly. And in the most recent review that Audioholics posted of the Denon AVR X5200W, Gene just put that up. I mean, he makes mention that with his ridiculous speakers, his status acoustic speakers that go crazy low in impedance and have 3 10-inch drivers apiece and driving them completely full range, that yes, the built-in amplifiers of the X5200 couldn't quite put out as much power as his past labs amplifiers. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that is true. I'm not going to dispute that, but you're not anywhere close to that kind of a situation.
Unless the KEF speakers he has are the blades.
And then, because those are pretty efficient speakers.
I think they are efficient too.
So yeah, this isn't one where if you got the UMC 200 and the XPA 500 and you put them in there, I'm not going to tell you there's zero chance of hearing any difference between your NR 1403. There's some possibility that you might, but it's not like the heavens are going to open up and it's not going to be like getting new speakers. Getting new speakers, you would hear a difference. Getting new amplification, I think you'd be sorely disappointed. So to me, this was more of a feature thing. And the other part of it is, if you get yourself a good receiver, one that has pre-outs, either of the options he's mentioning, then you always have the option of adding separate amplification if you really want to. There's no reason to not use it as a processor. So my vote here definitely would be to get a new receiver. I seem to remember,
maybe I'm remembering it wrong, I seem to remember those slim lines having pre-outs. Am I wrong?
Well, just for the front two. They have pre-outs just for the front left and right. But yeah, I wouldn't go for the UMC 200 if you are just dying to upgrade your receiver for some reason. I'd do it for the features, and yeah, I'd go for a Denon or Marantz.
Either of those other two will work. All right, Infinite Gary, who I did not skip on purpose earlier. Now that we know Denon and Marantz receivers will be getting an optional and paid Auro 3D audio upgrade, he was curious about their version of upmixing called Auromatic. Okay, Auromatic is how they take your their extra speakers, which are now placed on top of wherever your current speakers are, not like directly on top, but above,
30 degrees or
degrees
so above. Yeah.
right? Versus Dolby Surround, which was what they used to call Pro Logic, but now it's Dolby Surround because it's not just Pro Logic spreading things around 5 speakers around your or 7 speakers around your room. It's now 7 speakers around your room and a bunch of speakers on your ceiling, an occasional height channel or whatever. So how do they differ in their approach, and is there any way to set up your speakers so that you can hear both of them optimally? Okay, I thought I talked about this on. I wrote an article recently. I'm not sure. I know I said it last week, but I think I wrote an article last week too. Gene asked me to write an article on how to buy a receiver, and I wrote it, but I don't know that it ever got published. So I don't know where it is. It's now floating around the stratosphere. But I said on there basically right now, if you are looking to buy a receiver, and you are really interested in any of these things, 30 degrees is where you want your height channels to be. You want 30 degrees above your main speakers. If you can do that, then you can take advantage of both Dolby Surround and Auro 3D. And then the next place that you could put speakers, I think, would be directly over your head and to the side, so in line with your main speakers. And you can hope that Auro 3D will allow you to matrix the God speaker, the voice of God speaker, which is supposed to be right over your head, to those 2 side ones. That would be right over your head, but to the sides. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. But
it really doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I'm not. I mean, we'll see what happens in the future because I think that we're going to see that if people actually start putting speakers on their ceiling, we'll see what they end up doing in the end. But yeah, that seems to be how to take advantage of as many different surround processing. Now, DTS UHD, which will be the new DTS version of height, width, top, bottom speakers, they are promising that you don't have to put your speakers in any particular place. You put them wherever the hell you want, and they'll just figure it out. Now, we'll see whether or not that's going to be the case. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to be able to implement that.
Yeah, there is no layout of speakers that works perfectly for both Dolby Surround / Dolby Atmos and Auro 3D. Definitely your front, left, and right height speakers both can make use of those. So those are the easiest ones to get. Those are the ones that go somewhere between 30 to 40 degrees directly above your front, left, and right speakers on the front wall. So there you go. That'll work for both. Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of probably go with rear heights at this point because rear heights can work for Dolby Atmos / Dolby Surround. And then they're not perfectly placed for Auro, but they're not way out to lunch because at least they're not like directly overhead on your ceiling somewhere. So, I mean, you're basically going back to that old Yamaha setup with their presence speakers at the front or the back.
It's true. It's funny. Yamaha might have had it right all along. The other thing that you can maybe kind of do, I've been thinking about this, is if you took those top middle ones, cheated them out a little bit extra than what Dolby tells you to, but you cheated them out, they might work for your surround heights in Auro.
Right. Yeah.
That's about the only other place I can think of.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not perfectly optimal, but you're making the best compromises you can. So the front heights.
Is everybody starting to understand why we've been saying since the very beginning that this was stupid? It's not because I don't think it can work. It's not because I don't think it's a good technology. It's because why on God's green earth would anybody place the 32 speakers that they're going to need to take advantage of both of these in their home theater? No one's going to do it. They're literally going to have speakers inches away from each other.
Yeah.
Inches.
If you want to do either completely optimally according to the way they've said to set things up, you would need 2 separate setups, which won't work in the case of Denon and Marantz where you have one Odyssey measurement. You'd have to rerun Odyssey each time you want to switch between Auro. You'd have to reconnect your speakers and then rerun Odyssey again to switch between.
You would have to. It'd be easier to just buy 2 receivers.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
then
one way too.
Just switch between them.
Although
even then, you would have to have 2 sets of you'd have to have 2 sets of mains, 2 sets of surrounds, 2 sets of surround backs, 2 centers. stacked on top of
Yeah.
each other.
Anyway, as far as the different approaches between Dolby Surround upmixing and Auromatic upmixing, I mean, we haven't heard it, so we can't say for sure. But just going by the anecdotal evidence of what people have been saying, it seems as though Auromatic's focus really is mostly about ambience. It's about adding that elevation effect, because they're basically saying in the Auromatic upmixing, that voice of God speaker directly overhead is basically not even used.
I
So it's
he said in his interview that he thought that putting
yeah.
speakers on the ceiling was a waste of time.
Yeah, so it's really about those extra height channels, the quadraphonic heights that they're using. That's mostly about ambience. In the case of Dolby Surround, the speakers are meant to be overhead. They're meant to be on the ceiling. That's where ideally they're saying you would place them top, front, and top rear. And so a little bit more of the focus is on panning sounds, sounds that pan directly over your head, pan around the room. They're going after ambience too, but there seems to be a little bit more focus on getting those overhead pans to work. So that seems to sort of be the difference in approach. One is really just about ambience and only elevation, and then the other one is more about stuff going directly over your head. So which one will you prefer? Who knows? It probably completely depends on what you're listening to, which would be why you might want to be able to switch back and forth and see, but then you'd have to have two separate speaker setups. So,
And two receivers.
yay!
Well, I think you could take advantage of the subwoofers for both, though. I think you could do that.
Hopefully, yeah.
Because they usually have
Hopefully.
two RCA inputs.
Someone was saying on AVS that the way things are set up as far as the pre-outs go is that for that voice of God channel, if you are using it, it actually uses the sub 2 pre-out for some reason. Which, if that's the case, I'm like, oh my goodness, no. Heavens, no, please, no.
That is awesome. Yes.
I don't know if that's true. That was
That
just
can't
something
be true. I mean, it can certainly be true,
God,
but we'll see.
gosh.
All right, Ashley. What time have we got here? We got 10 minutes,
this
and
will
then we are
probably be the
ending this
last one.
podcast. This is the last one. Ashley, okay, he's got the Logitech Z5500 5.1 speaker package. It's a computer speaker package.
Yeah.
It has one optical input and one coax digital audio input. Okay, those are the two digital inputs. So it's got an optical and a coax. Ashley's got 4 HDMI sources, so he figured using a switch made the most sense. I said, doesn't he have a receiver? And Rob said no. And I said, okay, a switch makes the most sense.
I don't know if that's 100% true, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense. He found the Seawolf 4-to-1 HDMI 1.4 switch that also has optical and coax audio outputs. Will this allow him to hear 5.1 audio using HDMI out from all of his sources? And do we know of any other HDMI switches that might be even cheaper or better? I always check monoprice for things like this. RAM Electronics isn't always the cheapest, but you might check them.
This Sewell one is like $70, so I certainly haven't seen anything that.
I haven't seen anything that cheap.
Yeah, cheaper or better than that yet.
Is it going to work? Probably. Might not sometimes. This is only going to be able to go out. It's so whatever. What is his Logitech? What does it accept? Is it accept Dolby Digital or what?
It'll take Dolby Digital 5.1.
All right.
Yeah.
So that means you have to make sure all your sources are Dolby Digital. That means you have to force them into Dolby Digital.
Yeah, because this switch is not doing any sort of decoding. So
Right.
you have to make sure that what is coming out of your sources is already compatible with what you want it to be. In this case, you would want it to be Dolby Digital 5.1. So you got to make sure that all your sources, that's what they're putting out.
Yeah, and I think if you try to put out something else, like if you would put out DTS, you might end up with either nothing or horrible screeching. So those will be your options.
And if you were to put out just standard PCM, it would only be 2-channel. There's no way you could do surround sound PCM audio because you're limiting to an optical or a coax digital connection. The maximum channels they can do with PCM audio is 2 channels. So yeah, Dolby Digital 5.1 would be your friend here. It should work. I was reading through it. It wasn't entirely clear, but there was zero mention of it down mixing things to 2-channel or anything like that. So it's mostly just whatever audio is coming by HDMI, as long as it's compatible with that optical or that coax digital audio output, which standard Dolby Digital 5.1 would be, that should work.
Not DTS, not DTS, not True HD, Dolby True HD.
Right.
None of that stuff. It's got to be Dolby Digital. Nothing else. All right.
But
Number 2, is either optical or coax digital better than the other in any way? Technically, no. There should
Not
be
sound quality wise,
not
no.
sound quality wise. It's all ones and zeros.
Yeah.
It's as long as it gets there, it gets there. Optical
Yeah.
cables can sometimes be more expensive, can sometimes be cheaper, depending on where you buy them. Uh, I'd go with
Really
that.
should be.
Go with everyone that you can get the cheapest, and go with that.
The
So
one possible advantage is that optical cables have no possible means of creating any sort of a ground loop because
yes,
the coax digital is an electrical connection. If you're getting a ground loop hum, that is one possible way it could happen. Optical, zero chance of a ground loop, but other than
I
that,
told you we were never going to get to Bruno. I said that we were never going to do
I know.
that. I was right, and I even skipped a question to get here. All right, number three. And when or if and when he gets an AV receiver in the future, is there any way for him to connect his Z5500 speakers and or subwoofer? I guess it's the subwoofer that is attached to the speakers because it's all like a
Yeah, yeah,
computer.
part of the package.
All right,
Yes.
so you can finally hear lossless audio. First of all, honestly, dude, I don't know that you're going to be able to tell much of a difference between lossless audio and Dolby Digital with the current speaker setup that you have. All right,
Right.
so don't expect this transformative audio experience to come out. You're going to be like, I went through all this just so I could
No.
hear this. Yeah, the weak link is going to be at this point your speakers. Very clearly, it's going to be your speakers. So that being said, we talked about this extensively beforehand. There are analog inputs on your Logitech. Okay, they are
Well,
3.5 millimeter stereo.
yeah, we should say, first of all, I think the way he was envisioning this, as in, can I just take the speakers and connect them to the regular speaker outputs of a regular AV receiver? Can I just take the subwoofer output of a regular AV receiver and connect that to the little subwoofer that's part of the Logitech package? If that's what you were envisioning, then the answer is no. Because
Not even
the
a little bit.
connection on the subwoofer is not a standard RCA subwoofer connection. It's a weird D sub connection that only goes to the little control unit that sits on the desk, because these are PC speakers, and the speakers themselves don't use regular speaker wire. They have an RCA plug on the end that is meant to plug into that little subwoofer that's part of the package, because that's where the amplifiers live for all the speakers, is inside that little subwoofer. So a regular speaker connection method, no, you can't connect it to an AV receiver. But
But you do have analog inputs. There's three stereo 3.5 millimeter inputs, so headphone jacks on there. All right,
right,
one's gonna be left and right, one's gonna be left and right surround, and one's gonna be subwoofer and center.
that's
Okay,
right.
so what you'll need is you'll need a 3.5 millimeter to RCA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you will connect the RCA's into the pre-outs, which you will have
Yeah.
to spend more for your. You, this is silly. At this point, it's getting goofy. You'll have to get pre-outs on your receiver, which will cost
Mm-hmm.
probably double what you'll want to spend just to get these pre-outs. You could buy better speakers for the money you would spend for the pre-outs, but you
Right.
get the pre-outs and you plug the RCA into the left right, and you put that into your 3.5 input for left and right. Then you will have to turn it on. Okay, and you
Mm-hmm.
will have to play some test tones, and you will have to see whether or not you plug the right RCA into the right one, or if it's into the other one, because that's the only way I can think of that you're going to be able to figure this out, to be honest
Yes.
with you. Then you'll do the same thing for your left and right surrounds, and then you'll do the same thing for your subwoofer and your center channel. And at that point, you're gonna want to be careful because
Because if you're playing the subwoofer test tone out of the center by accident, with that tiny little center in the Logitech
yeah,
package, that might not be happy times.
you might want to keep the volume quite low. Or maybe at least figure out the pattern so that you, by the time you get to
Yes.
that point, you want to do that one last for sure. But that's
But
how you can do it, and then you can
yeah,
take advantage of all the Odyssey and everything else, and
that's
you
true. Yeah.
could get True HD and DTS Neo, whatever, not Neo, DTS Master Audio. You can get all that stuff.
But
If
at this point, all of the amplification that is built into the AV receiver, you aren't using any of that.
Anyway,
The
nope.
only reason this is possibly working is because you're using pre-outs from the AV receiver and still using the amplification that's built into your Logitech package. So this, I mean, we laughed about it because it is technically possible that you could have an AV receiver and still use these Logitech speakers. That this is the way we've just described it, but I don't think it's what you had in mind. I really don't.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to pick up a $150 receiver and plug these things in. You're
That's
looking
right.
at $600, five. I mean, at accessories for less, $600 minimum to get yourself a receiver that has pre-outs.
Yeah.
Minimum.
Which
And
would be kind of a waste.
yeah,
but if the whole idea was I'll get a good receiver now and I'll upgrade the speakers and the subwoofer later, and
this would work.
Can I just make use of what I have so I'm hearing something? Then this is the technically way that it could happen.
We actually backed into this because we thought about doing it a bunch of other ways, and we go, well, technically you go through the pre-outs, and it's funny that we backed into it. All right, so Bruno and Fred, we will see you next week. Yeah, Bruno and Fred, and then Williams' review we'll talk about next week. Once again, thank you, Eliezer, and for your donation, and Niclas for helping us get on TuneIn Radio, which may or may not happen now that the website's completely down. I keep checking it, and it's not up yet, so server guy is maybe taking a nap. I don't know what's going on. Yep, bandwidth limit exceeded. All right, you can contact me, Tom, at avrant.com, Rob at avrant.com. Rob's Twitter is at FirstReflect. I am at avrant_Tom. Website is www.avrant.com, facebook.com/avrantpodcast. That's all the places that you can normally get a hold of us. Send your questions, comments, anything else? Pictures.
I think that's it. My
larger ones than the ones we've been getting lately, which are so small.
My voice held out with my swollen lymph nodes. I'm quite
happy. Rob is sick, and he is powered through. Those of you that have been asking about my knee, it's feeling better. It's still stiff, but it's no longer really swollen. It's still a little numb. I limp slightly, just a little bit, but I'm getting around. Stairs are still kind of my enemy. But other than that, I'm making do. So things are going well on the healing front. So thank you guys for asking. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
All right, we will be starting the after party in just a few minutes. Those of you who have stuck around for this, see you guys.